Hi, my name is Patrick Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Equal Right. Equal Right is a global climate and economic justice nonprofit organization. And we work on climate, tax justice, and universal basic income. And what I'm going to talk about today is the interrelation between universal basic income and the environment, and how a basic income can help to support a just transition in particular. Often that isn't a connection that people make when they think of universal basic income. You often think of poverty alleviation, maybe health and well-being, but there's actually quite a lot of climate relevant themes that a basic income can help to support or indeed have a direct impact on. So here are some of the areas that we as an organization have identified that are relevant to climate justice, and we use climate justice as a normative term that can try and address some of the historic imbalances and injustices that have contributed to climate devastation as we see it today, both across the UK and worldwide. So first off, a universal basic income can help to achieve a more inclusive, just transition. And traditionally, when we think about just transition policies, they're often focused on a particular demographic, often fossil fuel workers, oil, gas workers in the global north. And that does speak to a particular demographic. But an inclusive just transition tries to design a process that everyone can benefit from and share in. So, women, people with disabilities, indigenous communities, young people who wouldn't necessarily be included in what you would immediately think of as just transition, but are just as important in that process. And through being a universal individual and unconditional program, a UBI can help to reach all of those communities. In terms of climate action, a universal basic income can support involvement in volunteering, in activism, and in also conservation and nature-based solutions that are often unremunerated. There's not a lot of money in climate activism, but it's an incredibly valuable way for people to spend their time. We should encourage more people to get involved, whether it is planting trees in their local community, whether it is joining a local climate justice organization, whether it is going to COP and other international conferences to campaign for climate justice. All of this needs to be remunerated in some way for people's time, and a basic income can be one way to do that. And in particular, with conservation, we're seeing increasing evidence of this globally in places like Peru and Rwanda and Indonesia, where unconditional cash transfers, another name for a basic income for all intents and purposes, are actively providing the financial resources for often indigenous communities to carry out conservation activities, and also to have an economic support that diminishes the need to engage in extractive industries like logging, for example. There is also some evidence that a basic income can help promote greener choices through people having a regular and sustainable form of income that can enable them to take more environmentally friendly consumption decisions. And, for example, purchasing less disposable, cheaper goods and investing in more long-lasting, environmentally friendly goods. A basic income can also have an impact on climate mitigation. So it can be a form of funding for renewables, for electric vehicles, and for spending money on cleaner fuels. And there's some evidence, for example, in pilots in India that people receiving basic income were more likely to move to cleaner fuel sources. Now, that's not to say a basic income alone would be able to pay for solar panels or to pay for an electric vehicle, but it would help in terms of affordability for some of these things that are often out of reach for many lower and middle income households. For climate adaptation, a basic income can play a vital role in building resilience for people. And when we think of climate adaptation, people responding to natural disasters, whether it's floods or storms, other extreme weather events, we often think of, Bangladesh or Malawi. But actually, we're seeing year on year that this is affecting people in the UK. It's affecting your constituents. It's affecting all of us. We had serious floods in Northern Ireland, where I'm from, just a year and a half ago, and we're seeing increased instances of this every year. And indeed, there needs to be a economic response in the wake of those natural disasters that provides people with direct support and allows them to recover, rebuild, and also build resilience as well. And a basic income can be one way of providing that. And linked to this, basic income can also be seen as a form of loss and damage. So it's not just about helping people to adapt and prepare for natural disasters, but it can also be seen as a form of compensation for losses incurred as a result of those natural disasters. And it can be a very quick, efficient, and effective way to get money directly to those who need it. And finally, political feasibility, and this isn't always one that people think of whenever they think of basic income, but actually having political feasibility considerations when we're thinking about it is quite important. So the example I want to use here is Iran, which isn't somewhere that often comes to mind when we're thinking about progressive policy solutions, but actually Iran removed a lot of their energy subsidies about 10 years ago and replaced it with a unconditional and universal cash transfer. And this was largely to compensate people for any inflationary impacts that came from removing those subsidies on fossil fuels. And that program has not just addressed household poverty in Iran, but it's also enhanced the political feasibility of those reforms. On the other hand, if we take France, for example, thinking back to the Gilets jaunes protests around just under 10 years ago, we had an effort by the government there to remove subsidies, but there was no direct redistribution to people and to households. And as a result of that, you saw people taking to the streets, popular action against those ultimately necessary reforms, but they weren't seen as politically viable because people were losing out as a result of energy prices increasing. So when politicians are thinking about the necessary reforms to remove energy, fossil fuel subsidies, or to introduce carbon taxes, which are all things that we would advocate in our organization, they should also think about the impact that that will have on consumers, on the cost of living, and how they will compensate directly for that. And a basic income can be part of that solution. But crucially, how do we pay for a basic income? And one of the policy solutions that Equal Right has developed and modeled is cap and share. And this is a policy framework that directly links the climate crisis with financing mechanisms for a basic income. I'm going to very quickly take you through this. So first of all, there's four key components to cap and share. The first is a cap on the maximum amount of fossil fuel that can be extracted. We model this at the global level. It could also be modeled at the UK level based on the UK's share of the global carbon budget. And that would be legally binding, and companies would have to apply for permits to extract fossil fuels under that cap. And then within the cap, we would apply a charge for every ton of CO2 equivalent that is extracted by fossil fuel companies. We've modeled a charge of $135 per ton. And then increase that by 16% every year to try and really disincentivize extraction as much as possible and maximize the amount of finance that can be raised through that charge. That delivers just under 5 trillion in its first year of operation alone, so a substantial amount if implemented at the global level, and also very much in line with the quantum needed for global climate finance. One of the innovations that we've introduced to this model is a fund, a global commons fund, where the revenue from the charge would be placed into an investment fund that would invest in the green transition, renewables projects, other ethical green business models, and would help to build capital in a fund that could facilitate those basic income payments and a range of other climate priorities. And then finally, the share component is where the basic income comes in. So that's essentially dividends from the fund being paid to all citizens of the world or participating countries in the cap and share system as a universal basic income. And our modeling suggests that those payments at a global level could be high enough to eliminate global poverty by 2050. As well as also compensating people for any impacts of energy price inflation as well. And this is just a summary of some of the figures here. I'm going to move on from that and just wrap up. If you'd like to find out more about the work of Equal Right, you can visit our website. My email address is also there, or you can scan the QR codes below to find out more about our cap and share proposals, or sign the Cap and Share Pledge, which is an initiative we have launched to encourage people to find out more about our ideas and sign up to support them as well. Thank you very much.